Canadian Bulldog from Wrestling Merchandise and Memories. That's merchandiseandmemories.com. And today we're asking you to dust off your Duran Duran LPs, plug in your NES, and check out our totally awesome Top 50 WWF Stars of the 1980s list. In counting down the top 50 WWF stars of the 1980s, we looked at the following criteria. How prominent was the star in the WWF between the years of 1980 and 1989? Were they involved in memorable matches and angles? And are they often associated with the 1980s wrestling scene? Note, while celebrities such as Cyndi Lauper and Mr. T were arguably among the biggest stars driving the rock and wrestling era, we've excluded them here because they were more special guests than they were WWF stars. Just before we get started, wanted to let you know that Wrestling Merchandise and Memories has more than 100 unique and conversation-starting top 50 lists on its site. To check it out, visit bit.ly/top 50 lists. Number 50, WWE Hall of Famer Koko B. Ware debuted in the WWF in 1986. Nicknamed the Birdman and always with his macaw Frankie in tow, Ware was largely a mid-carder, although he achieved prominence through singing the title track Pile Driver on the second wrestling album. Number 49, WWE Hall of Famer Cowboy Bob Orton spent almost all of the 1980s in the WWF. Most famously, the father of Randy Orton served as the bodyguard for Rowdy Roddy Piper, being in Hot Rod's corner for the first two WrestleManias before breaking off on his own. Number 48, Rick Martel joined the WWF in 1980, capturing the promotion's Tag Team Championship with Tony Gurria. After spending a few years in the AWA, he returned in 1986 and later struck gold with Tito Santana. By 1989, Martel turned on his Strikeforce partner and turned into the heelish Model. Number 47, Brother Love debuted in 1988 as the red-faced, white suit-wearing talk show host that strongly favored the heels while spreading his message of love. Over the years, Brother Love had confrontations with the likes of Hulk Hogan, Rowdy Roddy Piper, and others. Number 46, WWE Hall of Famer The Magnificent Muraco captured the Intercontinental title twice between 1981 and 1983, feuding with the likes of Pedro Morales and Tito Santana. By the middle of the decade, Muraco was managed by Mr. Fuji and would have a huge rivalry with Ricky Steamboat. Number 45, WWE Hall of Famer Larry Zbyszko only spent about a year during the 1980s in the WWF before traveling elsewhere, but it was a memorable year. In January, Zbyszko turned on his mentor Bruno Sammartino, leading to their memorable Showdown at Shea Stadium match that summer, which Sammartino won. Number 44, WWE Hall of Famer Greg the Hammer Valentine spent most of the 1980s in the WWF. In 1984, he feuded with Tito Santana over the Intercontinental Championship, and then after defending the belt at the first WrestleMania, he began teaming with Brutus Beefcake, and the two became WWF Tag Team Champions. Number 43, WWE Hall of Famer Classy Freddie Blassie was long retired from the ring by the time the 1980s began. The Fashion Plate managed a variety of top heels in the WWF at the time, including Kamala, Big John Studd, the Iron Sheik, Nikolai Volkov, Killer Khan, and perhaps most interestingly, the young Hulk Hogan. Number 42, WWE Hall of Famer The Fabulous Moolah had been presented as the WWF Women's Champion on and off for the better part of 28 years. In 1984, she became a focal point of MTV's The Brawl to End It All show, in which Moolah finally lost the title to Wendy Rector. Number 41, WWE Hall of Famer Mean Gene Okerlund was not only a spokesperson for our predecessor site, check out this YouTube channel for evidence, but he was also a focal point of the WWF from the moment he joined in 1984. Mean Gene was the primary backstage announcer for the early WrestleManias and Saturday Night's Main Event. Number 40, Bam Bam Bigelow only spent about a year in the WWF during the 80s, but the Beast from the East made a huge impression. When he arrived in 1987, Bigelow was courted by all of the heel managers before selecting Oliver Humperdinck. and at the very first Survivor Series, he was the final man eliminated in the main event. Number 39, Adrian Adonis was primarily a tag team wrestler in the early 1980s, although he battled the likes of Bob Backlund and Pedro Morales around that time. He also teamed with Dick Murdoch before transforming into adorable Adrian Adonis in 1986. Number 38, WWE Hall of Famer Nikolai Volkov had been in the WWF under different monikers but returned as the iconic Russian heel in 1984. After teaming with the Iron Sheik and capturing the WWF Tag Team titles, Volkov would become a singles wrestler, battling the likes of Hulk Hogan and Corporal Kirchner. Number 37, WWE Hall of Famer Harley Race had gained notoriety as a 7-time NWA World Champion, but he debuted in the WWF in 1986 and quickly became the crown and robe wearing King Harley Race. As the King, Race would battle the likes of Hacksaw Jim Duggan and the Junkyard Dog. Number 36, WWE Hall of Famer Hacksaw Jim Duggan debuted in the WWF in 1987 and made a run-in at WrestleMania 3. For the remainder of the decade, he would battle the likes of Iron Sheik, King Harley Race, Andre the Giant, Dino Bravo, and King Haku while winning the very first Royal Rumble in 1988. Number 35, WWE Hall of Famers The Hart Foundation, Bret the Hitman Hart, and Jim the Anvil Neidhart held the WWF Tag Team Championship for most of 1987, and while Bret Hart will ultimately be remembered as a top singles wrestler, most of his time in the WWF during the 80s was teaming with his brother-in-law, the Anvil. Number 34, WWE Hall of Famer Wendy Richter was arguably the most popular female WWF competitor during the 1980s. In 1984 and 1985, Richter was managed by Cyndi Lauper during a pair of high-profile MTV specials, as well as the inaugural WrestleMania. Number 33, WWE Hall of Famer Mr. Fuji spent the first half of the 1980s teaming with the likes of Mr. Saito and Tiger Chung Lee, even winning the WWF Tag Team Championship. But upon retirement in 1985, the Devious One became a manager, standing in the corner of the Magnificent Morocco, Demolition, and many others. Number 32, WWE Hall of Famer Pat Patterson spent his final years as a competitor in a WWF ring during the early 1980s, holding the Intercontinental Championship and feuding with Sergeant Slaughter. After retiring, Patterson became an announcer on WWF television and was even the referee for the main event of WrestleMania 1. Number 31, WWE Hall of Famer George the Animal Steele began in the 1980s as a vicious heel, but changed his ways after the first Saturday Night's Main Event and became managed by Captain Lou Albano. A staple of WWF's TNT and Saturday Night Main Event shows, Steele entered into a feud with Randy Savage over Miss Elizabeth. Number 30, WWE Hall of Famer Big John Studd was in the WWF in the early 1980s, managed by Classy Freddie Blassie and feuding with Bob Backlund. By the middle of the decade, Bobby Heenan had become his manager, leading him into an epic rivalry with Andre the Giant. Studd also won the second Royal Rumble in 1989. Number 29, WWE Hall of Famers The Wild Samoans, Afa and Sika, captured 3 sets of WWF Tag Team Championships during the 1980s under manager Captain Lou Albano. Afa and Sika are both the patriarchs of the legendary Samoan wrestling dynasty. Number 28, WWE Hall of Famer Jimmy Hart was part of the WWF from 1985 onwards. During those years, the Mouth of the South participated in some of the company's biggest angles, managing the likes of the Honky Tonk Man, the Hart Foundation, the Rougeau Brothers, King Kong Bundy, and Greg the Hammer Valentine. Number 27, WWE Hall of Famer Big Boss Man debuted in the WWF in 1988 and was immediately cast as one of the company's top villains. Managed by Slick and carrying various prison-based weapons, Bossman would feud with Hulk Hogan and partner with Akeem. Number 26, WWE Hall of Famer Jake the Snake Roberts debuted in the WWF in 1986, shortly before WrestleMania 2. Always lugging his python Damien around, Roberts feuded with the likes of Ricky the Dragon Steamboat, the Honky Tonk Man, the $1 Million Man Ted DiBiase, and Ravishing Rick Rude during the 1980s. Number 25, WWE Hall of Famer Tito Santana was a mainstay in the WWF during the 1980s, is one of the only people to compete at the first 9 WrestleManias. Santana is both a 2-time Intercontinental Champion and a 2-time WWF Tag Team Champion. Number 24, Vince McMahon, love him or hate him, is of course the creator of sports entertainment, founding what is now known as WWE back in February 1980, but to most fans back then, he was simply the company's lead announcer. WWF fans recall McMahon's distinct voice calling almost all of the big matches during the 1980s. Number 23, King Kong Bundy appeared in the WWF just weeks before the first WrestleMania and had a 9-second win at the inaugural Supercard. Bundy also feuded extensively with Andre the Giant, teamed up with Big John Studd, and most famously battled Hulk Hogan in the main event of WrestleMania 2. Number 22, WWE Hall of Famer Ravishing Rick Rude first appeared in the WWF in 1987 as the crown jewel of Bobby Heenan's Heenan family. Feuding with Paul Orndorff, Jake the Snake Roberts, and others, Rude defeated the Ultimate Warrior at WrestleMania 5 to win the Intercontinental title. Number 21, the British Bulldogs, no relation to yours truly, debuted in the WWF in 1985 and started a feud with fellow Stampede Wrestling alumni, the Hart Foundation. Dynamite Kid and WWE Hall of Famer Davey Boy Smith captured the WWF Tag Team titles at WrestleMania 2, holding them for the better part of the following year. Number 20, WWE Hall of Famer Jesse the Body Ventura was easily the most colorful of color commentators during the 1980s. After competing in a tag team with Adrian Adonis, Ventura retired in 1984 and became the WWF's top heel commentator. Number 19, Demolition Axe and Smash debuted in the WWF in 1987. The duo quickly captured the WWF Tag Team Championship at WrestleMania 4 and held the gold for what was a record length up until very recently, and the first of 3 tag team reigns for the team. Number 18, WWE Hall of Famer The Junkyard Dog was arguably one of the company's top babyfaces during the mid-1980s. After debuting in 1984, JYD challenged Greg the Hammer Valentine for the Intercontinental title at the first WrestleMania and won the WWF's Wrestling Classic tournament the next year. Number 17, WWE Hall of Famer Superfly Jimmy Snuka was a heel in the early 1980s and challenged WWF champion Bob Backlund. In later years, Snuka turned babyface, having a famous steel cage match with the Magnificent Morocco in 1983 and engaging in a red-hot rivalry with Rowdy Roddy Piper. Number 16, WWE Hall of Famer The Iron Sheik made headlines in 1983 by defeating WWF World Champion Bob Backlund. A month later, he would lose the title to Hulk Hogan, effectively beginning Hulkamania in the WWF. The Sheik would also win the WWF Tag Team titles with Nikolai Volkov at the first WrestleMania. Number 15, WWE Hall of Famer Sergeant Slaughter started his run in the 1980s as a heel, feuding with the likes of Pat Patterson and Bob Backlund. In 1984, Slaughter defended the USA against the Iron Sheik in a moment that would cement his legacy as an all-American hero as well as a real-life G.I. Joe character. Number 14, WWE Hall of Famer Captain Lou Albano was known for guiding 15 tag teams to WWF Gold, many during the 1980s. During his legendary career, Albano managed Andre the Giant, the Wild Samoans, the British Bulldogs, Greg the Hammer Valentine, Ken Patera, and George the Animal Steele, among others. Number 13, WWE Hall of Famer Mr. Wonderful Paul Orndorff debuted in the WWF in 1983, being managed by Rowdy Roddy Piper and Bobby Heenan at various times. In addition to being in the main event of the very first WrestleMania, Orndorff headlined a massive stadium show in Toronto in 1986 against Hulk Hogan. Number 12, WWE Hall of Famer The $1 Million Man Ted DiBiase joined the WWF in 1987. He'd previously been there as a fan favorite in the late 1970s, this time as an evil millionaire with his own bodyguard, Virgil. Paying off both a referee and Andre the Giant, DiBiase attempted to buy the WWF World Championship in 1988. Number 11, Miss Elizabeth was never really a professional wrestler, but she was arguably the most iconic female WWF star of the 1980s. In the corner of Randy Macho Man Savage and later Hulk Hogan, Miss Elizabeth was a centerpiece in the Mega Powers and its subsequent breakup in the main event of WrestleMania 5. Number 10, WWE Hall of Famer Bob Backlund was the company's primary draw as WWF World Champion in the first 3 years of the 1980s, a title he first captured in 1977. Over the years, Backlund faced challenges as diverse as Jesse the Body Ventura, the Wild Samoans, Hulk Hogan, and Greg Valentine for his title. Number 9, WWE Hall of Famer Ricky the Dragon Steamboat debuted in the WWF in 1985, quickly becoming one of its most popular babyfaces, while feuding with the likes of Magnificent Morocco and Mr. Fuji. But Steamboat is best remembered for his rivalry with Randy Savage that culminated at WrestleMania 3. Number 8, WWE Hall of Famer Brutus Beefcake isn't always mentioned in the same breath as some of his contemporaries, but he was among one of the most popular names in the company in the late 1980s. After turning babyface in 1987, Beefcake's run as the Barber became incredibly popular. Number 7, with his long sideburns and his hair slicked back, WWE Hall of Famer the Honky Tonk Man was playing guitar for his adoring fans. The Elvis impersonator debuted in the WWF in 1986 and quickly turned heel. When he upset Ricky Steamboat for the Intercontinental title in 1987, it would lead to the second longest Intercontinental title reign of all time. Number 6, WWE Hall of Famer The Ultimate Warrior would not become WWF champion during the 1980s, although this was the decade that helped shape his legend. Debuting in the WWF in 1987, Warrior feuded with the Honky Tonk Man, Andre the Giant, Ravishing Rick Rude, and many others en route to his 1990s success. Number 5, WWE Hall of Famer Bobby the Brain Heenan debuted in the WWF in 1984 and quickly became the most infamous non-wrestler of that era. Heenan managed the promotion's biggest villains throughout that decade, including Andre the Giant, Big John Studd, King Kong Bundy, King Harley Race, Ravishing Rick Rude, and Paul Orndorff. Number 4, WWE Hall of Famer Rowdy Roddy Piper debuted in the WWF in 1984 and quickly became the promotion's top villain. His Piper's Pit talk show led to rivalries with the likes of Hulk Hogan, Superfly Jimmy Snuka, and Bruno Sammartino, and Hot Rod had featured matches at the first 3 WrestleManias. Number 3, WWE Hall of Famer Andre the Giant began the 1980s feuding with the heel Hulk Hogan, and 7 years later, the two had reversed roles in the main event of WrestleMania 3. The Eighth Wonder of the World was a top attraction throughout his career and was always at the forefront of the WWF during his run. Number 2, WWE Hall of Famer Macho Man Randy Savage debuted in the WWF in 1985 as wrestling's top free agent, with heel managers bidding for his contract. Over the next several years, Macho Man would feud with George the Animal Steele, Ricky Steamboat, the Honky Tonk Man, Hulk Hogan, Ted DiBiase, and many others. And the number 1 WWF star of the 1980s is WWE Hall of Famer Hulk Hogan. While Hogan's first run in the early part of the 80s was somewhat memorable, Hulkamania was truly born when he captured the WWF World Championship for the first time in January 1984. This led to main events or featured matches in the first 9 WrestleManias, and the Hulkster feuded with virtually all of the WWF's biggest heels in that era. So, which entries did we miss? Which entries did we misplace? Let us know in the comments section below, and be sure to thumbs up and like this video and subscribe to Wrestling Merchandise and Memories.